not such a good one today. I'm sure everyone found out yesterday, or heard the news yesterday, that Rick Derringer had passed. I'm not going to play any guitar in this other than just a few seconds ago. And I'm not going to play bits of his songs. You can find me doing my version, my imitation of Rick Derringer all over my YouTube channel. But I thought I'd just say, how important Rick Derringer was to me. Anyone who knows me, any of my friends will tell you that, since, go back 50 years. If you'd said to me, who are your favourite guitarists, I would have said Andy Powell, Mick Taylor and the Stones, Rick Derringer. And then it blossomed a bit to, Laurie Weisfield, Ray Gomez, and massively Danny Johnson, who was Rick Derringer's sparring partner in the fabulous Derringer albums. I first became aware of Rick Derringer when I was about 12 years old, and I was in a barber's shop having my hair cut, and on the radio they were playing Hang On Sloopy. I didn't know it was Rick Derringer. I'm trying to enunciate this as well as I can because somebody said that they had no idea what language I was speaking, so I'm going to try and speak as clearly as is possible. Fast forward a couple of years, and one of my friends saw the old grey whistle test. I didn't see this edition, and he said to me, "Oh, did you see Edgar Winter last night? There's Rick Derringer in a white jumpsuit, jumping about, like a little pop star." And I think that encompasses, the whole dichotomy, the whole dilemma of Rick Derringer. He looked like a glam rock superstar, but he played like a virtuoso. So, nowadays you can find that video quite easily. It's the Edgar Winter Band. Edgar Winter's got I think it's called the keytar, stand-up keyboard. Rick is playing that Black Les Paul that he played. I mean, I can tell you Rick Derringer stories for about 10 hours solid. I could bore everyone senseless with them. But you can find that video now, and it's obviously live, and Rick is playing some hellacious stuff. Around the same time, the Alice Cooper Band did Under My Wheels, which everybody in my neck of the woods just adored. Buried guitar solo by Bob Ezrin, who is it? Rick Derringer. Supposedly the story being that the original Alice Cooper Band, who were a fantastic band, I love the very early albums, just were having trouble getting in tune. Anyone who's ever been in a recording studio in their life will tell you, you can go crazy trying to get in tune. Rick Derringer turned up at the studio and, went in tune, and they said it took him 8 seconds, and they were just amazed. So Bob Ezrin thought, let's put this guy on the album. He plays the solo that's buried, you're fighting to hear it on Under My Wheels, but it's an incredible bit of playing. If you can find the DVD of the best of the Old Grey Whistle test, it's got Alice Cooper doing it. The band are miming, I think Alice is singing live, and it's Rick's solo that you hear. But when it plays out at the end, there's this really long solo that's not actually on the record. Fast forward a couple of years, All American Boy, which I still play, still listen to, like every week of my life. First thing I see every morning when I wake up is a framed album cover of Derringer live, and I finally managed to find a black t-shirt with the All American Boy. I've never worn it because it looks so good, it's like I'm keeping it for best whenever that is. But that is hanging in my bedroom, and right next to it is the framed Derringer live. Anyone who knocks on my front door, the first thing they'll see in the hall is a framed album cover of Sweet Evil, which is the second Derringer Band album. So when All American Boy came out, I was amazed. He was a glam rocker, Teenage Love Affair. He was a fantastic producer. You can hear it in his version of Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo, and obviously we've got the Johnny Winter and Live and Johnny Winter and albums that were Johnny's band, but Rick was hugely important and wrote Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo. So I am this massive fan by the stage of Rick Derringer and All American Boy. I played it morning, noon and night. And then the Derringer album comes out. And this time it's Kenny Aronson, Vinny Appice, this 19-year-old wonder kid, Danny Johnson, who, as I say, became one of my favourite players, and Rick. And there's a great book that has about 40 pages. It covers 4 guitarists, but it covers about 40 pages about Rick. And there's all the quotes from Rick Derringer are sensational. I mean, he was a philosopher of the guitar. Maybe you think that's pompous. At this stage, I don't care. He once said to Danny Johnson, you know, when you're an older guy, hang out with the young guys, you'll feed off their energy. When you're a young guy, hang out with the older guys, they'll tell you stuff you don't know. Danny Johnson tells this fantastic story of they were in rehearsals in New York, and they were playing, you know, this is the 4-piece Derringer band who did Derringer, Sweet Evil. Sweet Evil is a good call, along with, for me, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, Born to Run, Wishbone Ashes, New England, Ray Gomez's Volume for the greatest album ever made. And Rick just suddenly called time, and he said to Danny Johnson, Danny, what's happening when you're taking a solo? I'm paraphrasing here, as I will do with all the quotes. And Danny Johnson said, everything's cool, man. Everything's, you know, everything's great. The band sounds fantastic, you know. And Rick said, yeah, that's right. When I take a solo, you're freewheeling. You're thinking about what's coming next. And Danny Johnson said very honestly, at that moment, I could see myself on the next bus to Shreveport, Louisiana. You know, and that would be his time up. Thankfully, it wasn't. They did the 2 albums. They did Derringer Live. It's a good call for the greatest live album ever made. They did the bootleg live in Cleveland. You got to get that one. Live at the Whiskey. Just great records. 2 studio albums, and then comes the 3rd Derringer album, but Danny's not on it. Neil Giraldo has come into the band at this point, and Rick is playing just some amazing stuff. The 2 Derringer albums are really the ones for like 70s rock guitar, partly because the 2 of them are firing against each other. But if you go to Beyond the Universe, you'll see Rick just show you what he's got, and it's mind-blowing. If I Weren't So Romantic is more pop-based short songs. It's still got a beautiful harmony solo that he played both parts on It Ain't Funny. It's got Midnight Road, it's got Power of Love. You know, great album. And then came the run of solo albums. And by this stage, I'm having difficulty getting any of my friends interested. The only Rick Derringer song I have ever played on stage, although I have campaigned relentlessly for about 50 others, is Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo, because everybody knows it. So then comes the Todd album, Guitars and Women. And again, when that came out, my friend said, this is like a Todd album with, you know, Rick playing guitar. And of course, the irony being that Rick did play guitar along with Todd on the classic Todd albums, you know. And he's on Back to the Bars, which is another good call for the greatest live album ever made. Guitars and Women is an absolute masterpiece. Again, it would be in my top 20 albums of all time, and it's got Rick's solo on Desires of the Heart, which is just unbelievable. Please go and check that one out, if nothing else. It's also got a song called Guitars and Women, which, you know, lyrically, I guess, is about things that you liked. We then go into Face to Face. Face to Face, there's a kind of change because it's part live. It's got a revamp of Jump, 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 which was the jazz tune of All American Boy. And it's got a version of Hey, Hey, My, My. This is the story of Johnny Rotten. It's got a real wild, manic energy, but it's got a rockabilly song. It's got the very riffy You'll Get Yours, and which again he plays one of the, you know, if you did a top 50 composite of Rick Derringer's great solos, and I may well do that at some point, that'd be in it. So Face to Face is a great album. Rick has adopted at this point all the BC Rich guitars. You know, the Bird's Eye Maple one that looks a sort of turquoise mid-blue on Guitars and Women's got to be one of those beautiful guitars ever made. On Face to Face, he's got the 10-string BC Rich, you know. As if that's not enough, he's doing session stuff through all this period, right? He's producing like Lorna Loft, he's working with Barbra Streisand. Rick himself said one of his greatest solos was with a band called Air Supply. And he did 2 solos that, for all the the jazz aficionados out there, I think whatever anyone thinks about Rick Derringer, they may have to concede that two of the greatest guitar moments in Steely Dan's history, and that's a big call. Obviously, you've got, you know, like briefly you've got Midnight Cruiser, Ricky Don't Lose That Number, Reeling the Years, Kid Charlemagne, My Old School. You know, a lot of the most fantastic solos of the era. But first thing you hear on Showbiz Kids is Rick's side part, and you've got that beautiful, sarcastic. They got the Steely Dan T-shirt lick, right? He then came back to play on Katie Lied, and he does another great solo, right? So he's doing all the sessions, he's doing all the producing, he's like everything in the music business, but I think his solo career was getting slightly harder to facilitate at this point. Obviously still making albums, but like a lot of bands, he's moving from label to label, right? Then we get I Play Guitar, which played right into the hands of his critics. It's got, on the cover, he's got like, I think it's a BC Rich Stealth. It's a really pointy one. It looks like it could be like a pretty meaningful offensive weapon. And he's wearing like a black leather jumpsuit, you know, and he's doing the two-handed thing. More of that in a minute. But that audience, I think, had gone or were listening to other people. That album's come out twice. It came out as Good Dirty Fun, and it came out as I Play Guitar. There's then a live album after the robbery. Everything that the band owned was stolen in New York City, and they did a benefit concert. So that's a pretty good album if you can find that. It's all live. Ted Nugent, Beck Bogart, and a Pete Chet's got Rick playing the Jeff Beck. Then, you know, another thing that's overlooked is Rick could step into anything. You can hear him play Room 335 with Larry Carlton. You know, he had the ability to do everything, from where he says in Guitar Player, when he was 9 years old, it was just total into itness. You know, he was just obsessed with, you know, this thing. So I know I've missed an awful lot out. There's then The Night of the Guitars, Volume 2, and shame on me, they played in the UK and I didn't see the show. I know a guy on here who saw it. There were plans for the original Derringer band to reform and play in Britain around 2005, but that didn't happen. That would have been my chance to see Derringer with Kenny Hamilton, Vinnie Appice, Danny Johnson, Rick Derringer. You probably all know a version of the anecdote about the two-handed tapping stuff. You know, the guitar solo that you know, you hear Rick doing all the live stuff that then goes into You Really Got Me. You can see where this is going. And I think Van Halen, imagine seeing that. Imagine seeing Van Halen open for Derringer, you know, and then Derringer open for Van Halen. Both fantastic, and both guitar players at the highest level. You know, I don't mean to keep reiterating that, but obviously Eddie and Rick too, you know. And I think there's some dubiety about, you know, about Eddie saying, you know, why are you playing my song? You know, You Really Got Me. And in a later interview, Rick said, well, it's not actually my song, it's not actually your song, it's a Kink song, you know. But I think that song is synonymous with Van Halen. But to your hardcore Rick Derringer fans, that would be myself. You know, we knew it from every live Rick thing. There's then the foray into the blues, and surprise, surprise, he's magnificent at it. You know, he's on the Three Kings of the Blues. He did a run of quite electric, you know, up-tempo, I wouldn't say high gain, but you know, slightly different from the traditional clean, you know, Strat into a Tweed Fender bluesy sound that we all know. And they're all great records. And then a couple of years ago, one night I just saw on eBay that he brought out an album that was a redoing of a lot of the classic songs. And that's a great record too. So at the age of 77, Rick Derringer is born in 1947. He had one of the greatest careers in music. And as I said, when I was young, I always thought, if I ever wrote a book about music, if I ever got to write a book about music, it would be about Rick Derringer, because he seemed to me to link everything. You know, the prototype boy band. You know, then he's in this hardcore blues band, Johnny Winter Rand. Then he's got the solo career. He's a producer, plays with Cyndi Lauper. You know, has this massive solo career. He's in one of the hard rock bands of all time, Derringer. He's a session guy for Steely Dan. I haven't even mentioned Weird Al Yankovic. So there you go. Because his career is so fabulous, and because I'm such a massive fan, I've probably missed out loads. But that's it was very sad news yesterday. So there you go. Like, God bless Rick Derringer.